Hello, everyone. Welcome to the introduction to the link simulation. My name is Mary Holcomb, and along with Chad Autry, I'm going to be one of the faculty facilitators during your week-long program for the Global Supply Chain Executive Development Program. So today, the purpose of having this intro session is to just simply walk you through what the simulation is about. And hopefully when we have our first decision round on end of day Monday, you feel a little bit more prepared or knowledgeable about what the simulation itself is meant to accomplish. So the first thing I want to ask you is to ensure that you've received from Dr. Chapman already this morning on Wednesday morning a passcode so you can log on to the links-simulations.com and be able to enter that passcode and access your industry so you get a chance to see what they're looking like. If you haven't gotten that passcode, I would ask you to check your junk folder to start with to make sure it didn't go there, or to bulk mail as well. And if it's still not there, please let either me or Sheena know, because what we will do then is check email addresses to make sure that we have it correct. So with that in hand, I'm going to switch screens, and I'm going to share a presentation that I put together for the links introduction itself. And so without any further ado, I'm going to segue to that one. So hopefully what you're seeing now is this screen that talks about the links and the introduction to that as well. One of the things that we often get asked are, why a simulation? Why do we do this week-long, integrative experience for you? Has a lot to do with the fact that what we see happening in a simulation is that it gives us a chance to actually look at what's going on a really large-scale basis. It gives us the chance to really test some things that we know we'd be hesitant to in real life, to really, when our systems are functional, to try to take on that degree of experiment. And that's exactly what a simulation allows us to do. It allows us to try a number of things in complex systems, to understand the interrelated nature of those factors, and to see how they affect or impact each other. So what is links? As we said, it's just simply this large-scale tool that we're using. And what you're going to be doing in a team, and teams compete against each other. We have one industry, and we have 4 teams that will be competing for each other or against each other. You're selling this thing that we're going to call set-top boxes. Now, some of you will be familiar with what that is, and I can almost guarantee that for most of us, you have one, if not more, in your house. So what are those set-top boxes? Well, there are these high-tech electronic devices, and they're purchased by consumers. Businesses buy them as well, and they can be used for a wide range of things. Like, they could be used for interactive video conferencing. We could also use them for interactive TV. We could use them for local area networking, wireless networking itself. We could do the internet long-distance calling using a set-top box. And in fact, this is a growing use for them. We could use them to control and monitor really a range of electrical devices that many of us have in our homes and our offices as well. And so we have 2 products in this set-top box line. We have hyperware and we have metaware. So let me just give you a little detail about those 2 particular products that we have. They each have 4 different components that you will be doing some scheduling for, all the way from how much we're going to sell in terms of the forecast or the S&OP, and all the way through how much we're going to manufacture and how much of each of those products we're going to send through our 2 channels to those 3 regions. But to talk about what makes a hyperware or a metaware, they share 3 common components, and then they each distinctly have a subassembly that makes hyperware uniquely that product, and then metaware also has a subassembly that defines it. So both of them have alpha, beta, and both of them have epsilon. You notice here we're using the Greek alphabet, right? It's pretty easy to remember, I hope. And so hyperware has that unique subassembly that we're going to call gamma, and then metaware has that unique subassembly that's delta. And so I like this commonality, and it also helps as we start thinking about where we want to manufacture, including the postponement, that we have so many common parts helps in that extent. As I said, because we sell to both consumers as well as to offices, we can sell either direct to those customers, or we also can go through some retail locations. If you Googled set-top boxes, well, you would also see, like, at least domestically, that companies like Amazon, Best Buy, a lot of companies through those retail locations, or as I consider to be that distributor or wholesaler, will also sell to me directly if I want to go through one of those entities. We're currently in 3 regions. We are in the U.S., which is considered to be our domestic market, and that's where we do primary manufacturing. We also have a market in Europe broadly and also in the Pacific broadly as well. This is another look at what the supply chain looks like. So let's take this diagram apart from region 1. So we'll go from left to right to look at it. And it really speaks to, in this first meeting of decisions, I think one of the big decisions that you need to make at a strategic level is what should our supply chain look like given the strategy that we want to have. That strategy would be, is it going to be one of where we're going to try to maximize the profit that our company is going to make? Are we going to try to be value driven? That would be a strategy as well. Are we going to try to be a low cost provider? All of those are particular strategies that you could take that would influence how we design the supply chain. Everyone starts out with what we see on that left-hand side, and we're going to call this our region 1. We have a manufacturing plant and we have a distribution center that is attached to that. As we said, we will be making these 2 products, hyperware and metaware. So we've got to buy raw materials, and we also have our subassembly component suppliers that we have to choose and determine who those are going to be. And even for region 1, for the US market, we have those 2 channels that we sell through. Now you'll notice that middle slice and then the third component that's on the right-hand side, those will depend on decisions that you make to support or to align your supply chain with the strategy that you want for your company. It could very well be that even in Europe and in the Pacific region, you do not want to have a distribution center. And if that's the case, you will simply be shipping direct then to the retailers and direct to the consumers. As you know from your many years of experience in business, those have implications for what you can do, and it also constrains your ability in some cases to be agile or flexible, or maybe if I look at the cost standpoint, it gets me where I want to be to support or align with that corporate strategy. It could very well be then that in another region, Europe or the Pacific, we decide to have a DC there, and we've got options when we determine to do that. We could own it, which would allow us to do postponement, or we could decide, the complexity of doing that, I'm much better off handling that factor in my domestic market, and instead, even if I own a DC, because I could do certain things relative to information technology, that I will just simply have a third party perhaps run that for me. It'll look a lot like some of the decisions you've made for your companies as well. Once again, if we have a DC in one or both of those regions that are other than US one, we can determine how we're going to distribute to those retailers as well as those direct to the consumers that are in those particular markets. So on Monday afternoon at 4:15, when we meet together as teams and start making really a host of decisions, I think this diagram and this overview does a really good job of really leading you through what we're going to be doing. If you're familiar with the SCORE model, the SCOR, then you know that it looks at it from a process-related standpoint. That the first thing we do is that we plan. And because we're not going to introduce the generate demand, and I'll talk about that in a moment, really the first decision you make is going to be what I would consider to be an unbiased forecast. In other words, it's not going to be influenced by either our marketing spin of a promotional nature and or a manipulation of price. We're simply going to try to get a great handle on how much we think we're going to sell of those two products in those regions across those two channels. And I know your companies are much more complex than that, but trust me, as you well know, when you're managing the entire supply chain, it can be quite complex because this is one of many decisions that you'll need to make. So once we know what we think we're going to sell, then we need to procure or we need to source those raw materials and those subassembly components. And we talked about that earlier. Once we understand what we're bringing in, then it's almost kind of sequentially we can do this, but there is a step logic to this. Then we're going to schedule production, the manufacturing itself. Then after we have that production, then we're going to schedule where and how that's going to be distributed. And I say with the two of those, it's also going to be, since our network is kind of a one-time decision, are we going to own it as a third party or are we going to ship it direct? Then we need to choose what transportation modes and the carriers that we're going to use as our partners in the supply chain itself. So this is, I think, a really good overview of the decision process itself. So what's your challenge in this simulation? And there are multiple challenges. The goal is that you're inheriting a firm, and so one of the emails that you received from Dr. Chapman and from the link simulation this morning talks about the fact that month 3 results are available. So you're going to be inheriting this firm that's ongoing, and so you're going to pick it up and be in charge of this company and its supply chain for month 4 forward. So your goal is to improve that performance, and we'll talk about what those measures look like shortly in this presentation. You have to work together as a team, and as you well know, that's perhaps the most challenging aspect of all of this, because what we've tried to do is to put you in a team, not with someone from your company, but a diverse group of people. And based on your titles, Chad and I have tried to put teams together that reflect that diversity of your current area of responsibility. So we don't have all planners or people that are working in production planning on the same team, but that doesn't mean that you don't bring with you a portfolio of expertise. In fact, the recent research has suggested that for anyone that has I would say that 10 plus years of experience, that generally they have very deep experience in about 3, maybe 4 areas. And so the thing that we like about the simulation is that it's going to give you that broader end-to-end and perhaps a chance to look at some areas that you will gain a better understanding of, but might be something that you would think, that would be an area for which I'd like to get some more experience doing. And as I said, you're going to be competing against each other directly, and it gets fairly fierce in terms of the competition as the week goes along. So for those of you that look at this in terms of the process view, and that's kind of how I laid it out, it's just part of that whole industrial engineering background. I tend to think kind of process related. We have inputs, and then those also result in certain outputs. As I said, that end-to-end perspective is good because it gives us the ability to look at both customer-facing as well as trying to understand upstream in terms of the supply management component itself. The first decision involves forecasting, but once we turn on that generate demand, we're really doing S&OP. At this point in time, because we can manipulate 2 very important parts of what happens in terms of our revenue stream, it gets to be very exciting in terms of what our teams in competition do. We're making certain IT decisions, and we will do, you'll have research studies that are available to you, and of course there's a price for that, much like if you used a company that provides that information for you already, and you'll have a choice of which of those you want to invest in. So they lead to these 3 areas to the right there in terms of these outcomes or outputs. We're going to be looking at things like firm-wide efficiency. We're going to look at how well in terms of some operational aspects. And I will tell you, most of us from long careers in supply chain, we're really very good about the operational aspects. But what we're also going to try to make you broader and look at a different perspective is to concentrate just as well on that left-hand side in terms of what happens when we make decisions about those inputs and how they impact things like revenues and our profits, market share, etc. And as I said, those are also reflected in those product-specific outcomes that you see in the box here. Everybody's starting in essentially the same position. So part of doing the month 3 is that we did not want you to have to deal with startup conditions, because as you know, that's an entirely different animal in and of itself. And we could probably do a simulation that's nothing more than that. And so inheriting this ongoing firm gets you to a point that we feel like everybody is on this common ground. Now, when I talk about a relatively stable industry, the firms have emulated each other. The stable industry doesn't mean that there's not any growth. What that means is that what you're inheriting is that if we have a particular region or a product that has some volatility in it, and I would say none of them have a great deal unless it's introduced by the firms themselves through a competitive move. Then if it's a market that's in increasing or in a growth mode, it will continue to be in a growth mode. If we have a market that's fairly flat in terms of its revenue or sales, I would say to you it's going to remain that. And so part of that stability is that so far we've been tracking, your competitors have, but now it's time for you to come in and really make that difference using those supply chain capabilities. I like this quote from Bill Gates. I think that over the years, that one of the things that Chad and I have learned about being the facilitators for this simulation at the graduate level as well as in executive programs is that the teams that seem to have the edge are those that know how to use that data and information, and they leverage it in ways of which it really will determine not only in simulations that really are a representation of real life business, but it also will serve you well in business itself. So now let's talk a little bit about the decisions and the decision forms that you'll be asked as a part of the simulation. I find that with any new tool that I use, a part of it is just getting familiar with what do I need to do, where do I need to start, what do those screens look like, etc. So to help you through that, even though it's a very short week and it passes by very quickly, we're going to do this phased-in decision making. As I said, we're making decisions on a month basis. So your Monday decision will be for month 4, your Tuesday decision will be for month 5, and so forth. And I find that the simulation, it gives us a chance to make these decisions. We get back the results of those decisions, we analyze them, and then we start that loop again by making new decisions as we roll through this period that we're going to be in this competition with the simulation. In that first month, we're going to ask you to do that part, that's the planning. And as I said, it's just simply a forecast itself. Then as we said, and I've lined these up really from a process about how you might look at making those decisions, then we have to purchase those raw materials and the sub-assembly components. We have to schedule manufacturing. And then we can make some decisions about information technology, about what we might want to do with our suppliers, etc. Then in that month 5, we're going to open it up to what we consider to be full functionality or full decision making. So in addition to those that you see in the previous month, you're also going to be making decisions about distribution, transportation, and then I've already talked about that generate demand, about how it involves how we're going to use promotion and price as some levers to help us generate demand, shape demand, or however we end up using those particular levers in our supply chain. Now, some of these, like information technology and distribution, may be for you one-time decisions. So let me explain that a little bit. Distribution really affects that supply chain network design. Once you determine what that looks like, yes, I'm going to own a DC in Europe. Perhaps instead I might make a choice to have a third party operate that for me. It could very well be I decide I don't want that complexity. I think I can accomplish what I want in terms of supporting the corporate strategy by having everything in the US. That will determine distribution. We don't see those decisions changed on a month-by-month basis because they do have implications. for the network, and they certainly have cost implications. So they're not turn on, turn off switches that we would make except at a very high strategic level. And that time period is certainly greater than a month. In fact, we're talking probably about 2 to 5 years that we would make those decisions. Information technology is a little bit the same, although I will find that when we start having some issues, people realize, you know, we really need to just find the money to do some of that, or we might decide I'm not really getting the benefits from that I thought. So information technology is one of those that has a bit more of, we can determine if we need it later in the decisions periods, or if we decide that it's not really doing what we want. But that one might be something that we don't do every month as well. So at the end of month 5 on Tuesday, you'll be at full functionality, and the fun really will begin, because we find that when we introduce promotion and price, that we really have to start worrying then about the bullwhip effect, because they are very powerful levers. We'll remind you of this, but we have yet to have a group for which this hasn't really introduced to the week-long program a great deal of excitement, I would say, sometimes good and sometimes not so good. Another way of looking at the links decisions, if you're in your meeting on Monday with your team and you're trying to figure out where do we start, what do we do, this provides the detail about the specifics of each of those decisions as they relate to the screens that you're going to see when you log into the link simulation. And I'll just move through that. It's more of a checklist, so the detail is there. It's not anything that I think that you need to, certainly memorize or understand it now, because when we get into that first decision, and after that, the screens do a really pretty good job of walking you through and making sure that you're making decisions for each of these points. Another way, if you're kind of struggling as a group to coalesce around what do we do, what decisions do we have to make in this time crunch, is that you might phrase it in the form of a question. And so when I'm thinking about what do I need to do to make sure that I'm making the right decisions for my company to build this competitive advantage, I might want to ask a question like under information technology, what IT options do I think are worth that investment that I'm going to make? What are the expected benefits? Why would I want to make this investment, both one time as well as ongoing, in that particular technology? This is something as a group I would say you need to discuss and determine. One of the questions we get often asked is, why can't I do practice decisions? And I would say to you that this decision is not one that Chad nor I made. It is fact, when I talked to Randy Chapman about it, I think he's got many, many years of experience using this simulation. And he thinks that much like real life, where we can't turn the clock back, that we need to approach this and put the time and effort in it to, at the very beginning, to realize that there are implications for and the results we have to live with for the decisions that we make. And so we start out that first round in saying, and I will say we've had some people that have made some impassioned pleas to turn it back. We had a group one time that changed the price of their product and didn't do an audit on how much they put the price in, and they had read it incorrectly, and they ended up overpricing their product for the market, and they went from first to last place. And so there are a lot of things. And so I tell you, if there was ever a time when I would have wanted to have a do-over, it would have been that one. But much like if we've got a product mispriced and it's on the shelf, or a consumer, and I think about airline tickets sometimes when they leave off significant digits and the airlines honor them, it's really a lot like that. And so what we have provided for you is that I have this link here, and you can go to the links-simulations.com, and there's a demo link, and this will take you straight to the supply chain one that we're going to be doing. Then it will also help you to get familiar with the screens, etc. I've tried to segue to this earlier when I did a live Zoom session, and I think it's much more comfortable sharing a PowerPoint than it is an internet site. But I'm going to try it again. I'm game for that today, and so if you will just bear with me here, I'm going to see if I can pull that up to see if it will actually share it. And I don't really have any way of knowing whether or not it does, and so I won't spend much time, but hopefully what you see on this screen is going to be that site where you can determine what's going on with that. And I don't think it's showing it at all because it's telling me that it's stopped the share. So I'm going to have to take a Zoom class to see if there is a particular way that I can do that as well. Let's see if it'll do a new share, if it'll take me to that particular screen. No, I don't think it's going to. So whatever I'm doing, it just doesn't really like that at all. So let me go back to my presentation now, and my apologies for not having that one work. So it's going to do a resume share for me here. I would, as I said, encourage you as you get the chance to do that is to look at that demo. And certainly Chad and I will be your consultants during the week, in particular for those first few decision periods where you're trying to learn so many new things to help you walk through that and become familiar and comfortable with the simulation. We just have a few more slides to cover. One of the things that I want to talk about is how do we determine who is really building a competitive advantage across these 4 companies that are competing against each other in this industry to sell set-top boxes. We have what we consider to be a scorecard that really reflects what we consider to be the boardroom level, or certainly that C-level, the CEO level, the things that matter to them. We have 4 financial measures. We have a host of operational measures. And then we also have customer measures. So we think that we've covered 3 of the most significant components and buckets. So what will this look like in terms of feedback to you about how you're doing in the simulation? As I said, if you're operating with an AS400 system, then this output's going to look pretty familiar to you. It's pretty basic, as I said, but it certainly does the job in terms of conveying the information. You'll also have Excel charts and some graphs that are generated from those charts that will give you some detailed information for planning. But if you were firm 1, and you'll notice that this is in month 6, then not only will you get your results, but you'll get a comparison to what's going on in that industry relative to the average, and then to the 2 endpoints. We'll also give you information about who is best in class, and then who is at the other end of the spectrum that leaves lots of room for improvement. Although over time, these get to be very tight in terms of that range itself. So with each month, you'll get this feedback along with a lot of other things as well. So I have some suggestions on how to get started. You've received the month 3 results as much as anything, and it relates to that Bill Gates quote. Getting familiar with those reports and the information you're going to get each month, how can you use those? How do you tie those back if you look at the demo and what the screens look like and the decisions that you make? Because remember, in a simulation now, it's taking that snapshot at the end of that period, and all these things have happened, right? We've procured materials, we've made product, we've shipped product, and we've had sales. And we're seeing that results captured in that report. So as I said, it's that snapshot. But you know, in terms of the operating performance, we have decisions to make again. So when we do the next decision period, we can capitalize on those strengths, and we can also improve where we have areas of opportunity there. And as I said, you need to look at what your current capacity is in terms of inventory, raw materials, subassembly components, and all those things. You are going to be stretched for time. We've yet to do this where that's not been the case, and particularly in that first time decision period where you're trying to learn just how to manipulate the simulation itself and get all of those decisions in. So the next steps, and the next slide I have would be questions, is that I would say read the manual. It's 120 something pages long, and I don't think that in your trying to get things at a good close before you spend a week away from the office that you're going to read 120 pages. That's not an expectation. But if you do get a chance to look through that PDF, I would encourage you to do that just so you get a better feel for all of the areas of decisions that you need to make. Let me just reinforce, or to make sure I make this point. Do not print out the PDF, because when you get here, we have a hard copy of that manual, your very own, all the 120 pages. And over time, we find it becomes highlighted, dog-eared, and other things. And as I said, you'll have Chad and I will be available as your internal consultant. So if you want to know how many units are in one particular shift and production run, we have that number for you. It's in the manual. In fact, we'll probably show you where it is. And I think you'll be surprised at how quickly you'll understand the mechanics of how the simulation operates. But to the extent that you can, if you've downloaded the PDF and you can bring that up on either an iPad or on a laptop if you're flying here, then certainly, or on Sunday night, but on Monday morning, we will definitely have this for you. And then in that first decision round, we'll help you reference and find those points that'll be important. And so that's why this intro was, I think, kind of important, is to introduce you to that, to realize the complexity of what you'll be handling. But most of all, we want you to have fun this week with the simulation. We've heard from so many people that have attended this course before that this integrated perspective, so throughout the week, you'll get subject matter experts on lots of different topics. This simulation is one of the things that pulls it together. So can you put into practice what we're telling you in terms of theory and what we've observed in practice? And it's a way to work in a team and get very different dynamics to understand when you go back to your organization, what are the challenges that you face? Because as we said, we have a very simple supply chain that you're going to be taking control of and managing. We have 2 simple products with very few parts to them. We have 3 markets and we have 2 channels. And even that's going to be, as we said, a kind of a tough week to try to emerge as the leader. We're looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to meeting each and every one of you. The weather here in Knoxville is absolutely just beautiful. We're supposed to be more fall-like, and in fact, the color is gorgeous. It's going to be a week of where it's going to go by so quickly, and we are looking forward to, at the end of each day, working with the teams to help them understand how to really excel managing an end-to-end supply chain. Thank you for joining me for this introduction. If you have any questions, and particularly if you didn't get your passcode, please let Sheena or myself know so we can make sure that you have full access to all of that. And as I said, just in parting, looking forward to seeing you on Monday. Goodbye.